Well, hello there. Today's video is potentially going to be very long. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm really going to try to fly through this as quickly as possible. But today we're going to be reviewing every single full series that I read in 2020. So last year, this is finally the end of my 2020 wrap-ups. Oops. But I did want to talk about all these because I read a ton of full series last year and there were some really good ones. So I'm going to try to review these as like full completed series. I'll let you know my individual ratings for all the books. And yeah, let's get into it. Let's start out with Maureen Johnson because I read 2 full series by her. So the first one is going to be the Truly Devious series. This is a YA contemporary mystery series about a girl who's really into true crime, and she attends this school where murder happened in the past and she wants to solve the cold case. So it's a little bit historical. There's a present day mystery as well. This was mostly a reread. The 3rd book in the series came out in 2020, so I reread books 1 and 2, and then I went into the 3rd one. I think that technically she's going to be publishing another book with the protagonist from this series solving a different mystery, but the first 3 books in this series really serve as a completed trilogy. It's focusing on one specific mystery. I have read and reviewed these books before on this channel. It was my 3rd time rereading Truly Devious, the first one in the series. What can I say? I love Maureen Johnson. I really enjoyed this series. I think it's really great YA contemporary, really great mystery. So many clues that really got me thinking. Lots of twists I didn't see coming. I'm a big fan of this series. I gave the first book in this series 4.5 stars. It remains my favorite. I just really like the first installment. The second 2 books got 4 stars. Overall, really loved this. Would highly recommend. And then the other Maureen Johnson series that I read in 2020 was the 13 Little Blue Envelopes Duology. So this is 13 Little Blue Envelopes in which a girl pretty much goes on like a European whirlwind sort of treasure hunt. Her aunt has died and left her a bunch of letters, and she has to like follow these clues and kind of do these tasks to figure out what's going on. And then there is a sequel to it that came out later called The Last Little Blue Envelope. This is also a reread for me. I read both of these books closer to their release dates. This was a fun reread for me. I forgot a lot of the stuff that happened in this series, so I was looking at the story with fresh eyes. Overall, I quite enjoy both of the books in this series. I feel like the second one, in a lot of ways, I don't know, part of me is like, I don't think it needed to happen, but when I just take it at face value, I think it was still a good book. I gave both of these 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't think they're the most amazing thing in the world, but I do think that they are really fun, like, adventures, really good YA contemporary, which is just something that I love. And I have no major qualms about these. I just think that they are fun books. I quite like them. Love Maureen Johnson as always. I had a good time. Next up, we can talk about another duology, and this was another one where I reread the first book because the second one came out and I wanted to refresh myself and go into the final book. And that is the Karls series by Hank Green. This is a really interesting urban sci-fi series about a girl who is kind of like the first person to make contact with alien life forms on Earth and becomes super famous because of this, and is just kind of accidentally thrown into the public eye, and it is a interesting meditation on fame and power. So an absolutely remarkable thing is the first one in the series. I read that book a couple years ago and I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was incredible. The second book to me was not as good, but it was still fantastic. I think it would have been difficult to be on par with the first one. So the second one I gave, I think, 4.5 stars. My main criticism of this second book was that my favorite character from the first one really wasn't featured very heavily. Like, the second one has a multiple perspective narrator and it starts developing a lot of the more minor characters from the first book, except for the one that I wanted to be developed just really wasn't a part of the book. So that was honestly the only thing that like disappointed me about it, but otherwise it was really good. And I just think that these are so well written. They are so interesting. They give you so much to think about. The characters are really vibrant and complex, and I think that the sci-fi elements are woven in really well in a way that's really accessible and really enjoyable. I really hope that Hank keeps writing books because I just fully enjoyed these. Another book, we have a theme here where I did a reread and then I finally went through and finished the series, was the Seer trilogy by Ray Carson. So we have the first book, Walk on Earth a Stranger, which I had read before. I thought it was really fun the first time around. It's a book I didn't really expect to like as much as I did because it's historical fiction, which I don't usually read. Imagine Oregon Trail. It is this book. And it also has the added twist of our main character who has the magical ability to kind of like sense and manipulate gold. So I reread that first one and I finally finished the series. The second book is Like a River Glorious, and then the third one, Into the Bright Unknown. And I gave all of these books 3.5 stars. Overall, I think that this series is kind of an underrated, fun time. These books are so addictive. Like, I just flew through them. This series does a good job of recognizing racism that was really present at that time and addressing it, and especially addressing it from the perspective of a white character who often tries to be a white savior and is shut down for that, which I thought was kind of refreshing. Overall, like, the cast and characters that make up this world are a really diverse group of people, and I really like them. There's a lot of like found family aspect of this series. I just found it to be a pleasant surprise for me. Not something I would usually pick up and enjoy, but I'm really glad that I did. Would recommend. We actually have quite a few more rereads to get into. A lot of books from my childhood that I did rereads of. So let's tackle some of those. For starters, we can do a duology. It's a middle grade contemporary duology. The first book is called P.S. Longer Letter Later, and the second book is called Snail Mail No More. This is written by Paula Danziger and Anne M. Martin. These are both epistolary stories from the perspective of two best friends, and one of them moves away. And so both the books are just letters and emails sent back and forth between these two friends who are now maintaining a long-distance relationship. I remembered really liking this as a kid, and it did not disappoint on reread. I think that this is such high-quality, strong middle grade fiction. There were a lot of things that just really hit my emotions, and I think that were so well done and so honest and complicated. A big theme in this book is like class, and when we start out, one of the characters comes from a really wealthy family and the other one comes from a very much working class parents who are really just trying to get their lives together. And as we go along throughout the series, we watch them kind of flip. The girl who comes from a really wealthy family, her father ends up losing his job. Now they're facing like financial instability for the first time in their lives, whereas the girl who grew up without much money at all, her parents are finally like finishing their degrees, and we watch her family grow into like a more stable position. I feel like class is something you don't really see talked about a lot in children's fiction. I think that this is just an underrated gem of a series. Yes, it is old, but it completely holds up. Pretty much anybody can find things to relate to in these two main characters. I think they're really well written and just like very lovely, like fantastic stories. I think I gave both of these books 4 out of 5 stars. I think that they're really strong middle grade. I would definitely recommend picking them up and giving them a shot because they're just really good. Another favorite from my childhood is the Poppy series by Avi. I had not read all of these books when I was a kid, but I read several of them, and I went back and I finally finished the whole series. We've got Poppy and Rye, Ragweed, Aerith's Birthday, Poppy's Return, Poppy and Aerith, and then the final book that was published in 2020 after an 11-year gap, Ragweed and Poppy. So I read all 7 of these books, and I really enjoyed revisiting this series. These are kids' books about animals, and it all takes place in Dimwood Forest. I think it's called like the Dimwood Forest series. I would say the majority of the characters are mice, like Poppy, Ragweed, Rye, those are all mice. We also have Aerith, who is a porcupine, but there are characters who are foxes, there are bats who show up. It just has, the woodland forest vibe going on, and I really enjoyed the nature element of this book series. Obviously the characters are anthropomorphized because they're all animals and like they speak to each other and they have relationships with each other and lives and stuff, but all of these animals, like their behaviors and the things that they do is pretty accurate to like actual nature wildlife facts. So I feel like this book series like really works for kids who are really into nature and animals, which I mean, I've always been like a huge animal lover my entire life. And I really do love that this is a book series that isn't about like magical animals. Like it's just about real, honest to life animals that you would find in your woods. All of them I found really lovely and just fun, and I just quite liked returning to them and this world. This series has some surprisingly relatable themes in it. So many different struggles that the characters go through that like really can be applied to real life, having to do with friends, familiar relationships, loneliness, loss and grief, power structures, housing instability. Truly, there's so many topics that get covered in this series that I feel like can be extrapolated to real life. Most of these books I gave somewhere in like the 3 to 3.5 star range. Most of them are pretty short. Some were better than others, but for the most part, I just think that each book was fun and I quite liked it. My favorite book in the series that I gave 4 stars to was Aerith's Birthday, because this is just focused on Aerith, who is definitely by far my favorite character. He is the porcupine. He's super grumpy, but like in a way that's just like you love him. But truly all of them as a whole I think is great middle grade. I'm a big fan of Avi. Next up, I reread a couple Tortall books. So I reread the Alana series by Tamara Pierce and then the Immortals series. These are both book series that have 4 books each, and they take place in the Tortall universe. This is high fantasy. The Alana series follows this girl named Alana who pretends to be a boy so that she can train as a knight. And then the Immortal series follows a girl named Dane who has the magical ability to speak to animals, and so it's kind of about her training and developing her magic. It all takes place in the same world. You see characters appearing in both series. I don't really know what to say besides that, like, I usually dislike high fantasy, but for some reason the Tortall books like just feel accessible to me. I really like the way that Tamara Pierce writes. I just really like the characters and like the world that she built. Something about these books is just like very comforting, and it truly is just a joy to read them. Alana, the First Adventure, In the Hand of the Goddess, The Woman Who Rides Like a Man, and Lioness Rampant. Those 4 books make up the Song of the Lioness Quartet. I gave all of them 4 out of 5 stars. I just think that it's such a strong series. It's such a good first step into this world. These were originally published in the 80s, and for 80s high fantasy, I think that these books do a lot of great work. In general, Tamara Pierce is kind of like touted as like writing feminist fantasy literature for young readers, which I do agree with. I don't agree that all of her stuff has aged perfectly, because it hasn't. There definitely are some like kind of blurred lines of consent and relationships with like older men with like younger girls that I think don't get examined closely enough. Her earlier books especially are also kind of not a lot of characters of color, a lot of like heteronormativity, but for what it was when it came out, I do think that this series has a lot of great messages for girls. I think it's really enjoyable, obviously. If you've never heard of Tortall books or never picked them up, I mean, yeah, start here, Alana. Just see where it takes you, because these books really are great. Moving on to the next quartet in the Tortall universe, we have the Immortals series. So the first one is Wild Magic, then we have Wolf Speaker, Emperor Mage, and then The Realms of the Gods. And I don't enjoy this series as much as the Alana books. The first one I gave 4 stars. I think it's a really strong start to the series, but then it kind of flounders a little bit. The second one is my least favorite in the series. I gave it 3 stars. The third one gets better. It's for sure more interesting. I gave it 3.5 stars. And then the fourth one, again, just is like, it's still good. I still like Tamara Pierce's writing. I like the world. But I don't know why this series just is slightly less interesting. So the last one I gave 3 stars, but I still think they're worth reading. And next up, I still want to keep moving through my Tortall reread, is going to be the Protector of the Small Quartet, and I haven't gotten to that one yet, but I'm looking forward to it because I love those books. So yeah, read a lot of Tortall books in 2020, enjoyed them, as I already knew I did. Let's talk about another popular fantasy series. I know that I said fantasy isn't really my thing, and I kind of think that this is an example of this because I just didn't love this series, and yet for some reason I read all the books. This is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. The first one is The Cruel Prince. This book is so popular. This is a, I guess, YA fantasy series about a girl who is human, but she lives in the fairy realm, and it's like a hate to love romance with like this fairy king, and he's kind of evil, or he's not the king, he's the prince, he's the cruel prince. The first book I struggled with. I just kept thinking, like, how is this so popular? I just don't quite get it. I had no connection to this protagonist at all. She wants to be a part of the fairy world so badly, but why? Literally every single fairy is mean to her. Like, they just manipulate her and abuse her because she's human. If you want to hang out with those people, then fine, but like, what do you get from this? Like, the only thing she really wants is power. I'm all for a series with like a morally gray main character and like a character who is power hungry, but I feel like I didn't really see that being exuded from the main character. It literally just told you it in the narrative. Like, there were just so many points of the book where she just like made comments like, I want power, or like, I love being in control, but like, you don't actually get to see her like do anything that like exhibits those qualities, and so it just like didn't really sell me on that concept. I think that if you're going to have a protagonist who's like that, you have to do it like really well. I gave this first book 2.5 stars, but I was like, whatever, we'll go into the second book and see if it gets better. The second one did not get better for me. I gave it 2 stars. I liked it even less than the first one. And then at that point I was like, well, I read 2 out of the 3 books in the series. I might as well just finish it off. The third book I weirdly kind of liked. There definitely were still some elements that I hated, but I don't know, I just found myself enjoying it more than the first 2 books. So I gave the third one 3 out of 5 stars. Like, I thought it was pretty good. Like, I didn't hate it. I had an okay time reading it. Was it worth it to read the whole series to get to that point? Probably not. But you know, I did it. It happened. I was in so deep. I also read the novella. It was super short, so I flew through it. I did not like the novella. I gave the novella 2 stars. I thought it was pointless and it gave me nothing, really. So that was this extremely popular YA fantasy series that everybody seems to be obsessed with. I thought it was not that great. This series also, like, specifically made me realize that I don't actually like the enemies to lovers trope when it's genuine enemies, because like the 2 main characters of this book like are genuinely horrendous to each other, and I was like, okay, I'm not about this. I'm into a hate to love romance where the characters don't really know each other, but they just like have like banter, or they have like a bad first impression. Or I'm into like rivals to lovers, when 2 people are going up against each other and have like the same goal, and so they mark each other as their enemies, but it's not like they actually hate each other. Straight up political enemies. I hate this person and I'm going to be evil to them, and then they become lovers. No, I don't like that. So that was that. Should we review another super popular fantasy series? I'm gonna go with yes. I read the Percy Jackson series in 2020. I had never read these books before. I know that they're super popular. I was a little bit too old for them, I think, at the peak of their popularity, so I just never really got into them when everybody else was reading them. And I finally decided to do it, and I read the first 5 books in the series. I know that this is like an ongoing world, and the first series is 5 books. I think everyone knows what Percy Jackson is. It's a middle grade series about a bunch of kids who are descended from Greek gods, so pretty much like everything in Greek mythology is real, and you follow a bunch of characters who are getting into shenanigans because of that. So we've got The Lightning Thief, which I gave 3 stars, The Sea of Monsters, which I gave 3 stars, The Titan's Curse, which I gave 3 stars, The Battle of the Labyrinth, which was my favorite in the series, and I gave it 3.5 stars, and then The Last Olympian, which I gave 3 stars. So I'm pretty sure that's gonna come as a disappointment to a lot of people that I gave most of the books in the series 3 stars. listen, I don't have that nostalgia factor, and I think for me, I'm just not really into an action story. 50% of every single one of these books is like a battle. I'm like, I just don't really care about that as much. I also had kind of like complicated feelings on the representation of disability in this series. There are characters who use wheelchairs, and then you find out that they're satyrs, and so like they don't actually use wheelchairs, they just are covering up their hooved legs. And Percy has like ADHD and dyslexia, and then like you find out that he doesn't really have dyslexia. That's just because he's a half-blood. I just feel kind of icky about disabilities being explained through magical means, where it's like, oh, they're not really disabled, they are magic. Ta-da! The wheelchair stuff, I think is just like inexcusable. It's just like not a good move. The ADHD and dyslexia representation in this book, I think, is a little bit more understandable in the sense that the explanation of it as like there's a magical reason that you have this is pretty just like not great. But I do think that the experience that Percy has, like as a kid with dyslexia, feels genuine. And I do think that Rick Riordan was like trying to give that representation to kids who actually struggle with ADHD and dyslexia, and to like be able to see themselves in fiction. I understand why this is so popular. It's very upbeat, and there's a lot of great humor. It's very energetic, and I did like it. Like, I just thought that these books were fun. I enjoyed them. But that's about it. Next up, let's talk about the Matt Kruse series by Kenneth Oppel. So the first one is called Airborne, the second one is Skybreaker, and then the third one is Star Climber. These books, I feel like, kind of straddle the line between YA and middle grade, but I think it works really well as books that would appeal to both audiences. And also to adults, because I loved it. This takes place in like an alternate history, kind of. It was difficult for me to place exactly what year this took place, but like maybe the early 1800s or so. So it's like historical fiction, but then it has kind of steampunk, speculative sci-fi element to it in a sense. Everybody travels by airships, basically like a giant blimp in the sky. So the main character is on the crew of like a luxury airship. So imagine like the Titanic. It is basically about our main character forming a relationship with one of the passengers on board, and they get swept up into this like adventure that involves exploration of like new lands and new species, scientific discoveries. There's pirates. The series, as it goes on, gets progressively more intense and just extravagant and adventurous. I gave all three books 4 out of 5 stars. I think that the characters were really vibrant. I think that this, like, the concept and the world that was created was really entertaining and really fun. These are kind of like backlist titles that I think are fully worth your time, definitely worth checking out and giving them a chance, because I really ended up loving them. Why don't we talk about another alternate history series next? This is the River of Teeth duology by Sarah Galey. The first one is River of Teeth, and the second one is called Taste of Marrow. And these are both novellas, so they're very short. You will be able to fly through both of these extremely quickly. But for something that is so short, I was really impressed by these. The first one I gave 4 stars. I thought it was super strong. The second one I did not like quite as much, but I still really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. This was a genuinely like proposed idea for people to start like breeding hippopotamuses and like use them for meat in like the 1800s. And so this kind of like takes that idea and runs with it. So it's like a world where we like started like breeding hippopotamuses and hippopotami husbandry. So this is like a Wild West setting. It takes place in the 1800s, like in the South. It's kind of like a heist story almost, where it's a team of people getting together to pull off this specific thing. I don't want to spoil it. They like ride hippos like the way that you would ride horses, like through the swamps of like the bayou in Louisiana, and it's just a good time. The characters are so electrifying. It's a very diverse ensemble cast. There's a lot of queer characters. It's really high adventure, high stakes. It was a very good time. I definitely would recommend these. I know I said this before, but like I genuinely enjoyed reading a book set in the 1800s. I feel like I've never been into historical fiction as much as I was in the past year. I feel like all the historical fiction books I read tended to be historical fiction like with a speculative twist or like with a magical element thrown in. So maybe that's like kind of the key thing that I need to keep me going. But in this series, it really worked. I loved the hippopotamuses. It was highly enjoyable and I was quite pleased with it. I also tend to struggle with novellas, but I think that for being such a short story, the characters and everything were really well developed and it was just a great story. Really fun time. Let's get 2 series out of the way that I technically did not finish. So the title of this video is a little bit of a lie. So the first one is gonna be the Nancy Drew Diaries. The Nancy Drew Diaries, I mean, they're Nancy Drew books. This is a new reboot of Nancy Drew. It's modern. Nancy, I think, is like 16, but she definitely feels younger. This definitely reads like it's for a younger audience. I think it's aimed at middle graders. Yeah, it's just a new iteration of Nancy Drew and she solves mysteries. I was very disappointed by these. So I read the first 4 books in the series. We've got The Curse of the Arctic Star, which I gave 2 stars. I found it to be very disappointing. It actually ends on a cliffhanger, which was absolutely bizarre. Like, no Nancy Drew book should just end on a cliffhanger like that. It was not even long. It was a really short book. There was no reason to split the mystery into 2 books. So then we move on to the second book, which is Strangers on a Train. It does wrap up the mystery, but not in an interesting way at all. I gave it 1.5 stars. I was really disappointed and I was really angry that it like broke the story up into 2 books for no reason. Then we have the third one, which is Mystery of the Midnight Rider, which was better, but still not that great. I gave it 2 stars. And then we had Once Upon a Thriller, which was fine. I gave it 2.5 stars. But overall, I was just really disappointed by these books, especially the first 2 in this series were such a letdown. As somebody who loves Nancy Drew, these books were very juvenile. And Nancy Drew books are already pretty juvenile. The mysteries were so obvious, so uninteresting. I really didn't like the characterization of Nancy and her friends. I am still reading it just because it is Nancy Drew and like I just am reading it, but I'm not super happy with how this series has gone so far. We'll see if maybe it gets better. But yeah, I read the first 4 and they just did not impress me. I'm obviously not going to review this as a full series because there are so many Nancy Drew books. I'm not going to read a full series of Nancy Drew in 1 year, but I read the first 4. And then the other series that I did not finish was the My Teacher is an Alien series by Bruce Coville, which is another middle grade series. I read the first 2 books. It's a 4-book series, and to be completely honest with you, the only reason I did not finish the series was because my library only had the first 2 books on audio, so like I listened to them. I liked them both. I gave them both 3 stars. I thought that they were fun, but I mean, I didn't like it enough for me to like request that my library purchase the other 2 books in the series, so I just stopped. If my library had had them, I probably would have just, finished them up. They're really short. They were entertaining, but that's about it. So the first one is called My Teacher's an Alien. The second one is called My Teacher Fried My Brains. And then there are 2 more in the series that I didn't get to. But basically it's about these kids and they find out that their teacher is secretly an alien. And it's just goofy. It's Bruce Coville. He writes really fun, entertaining middle grade science fiction. I've read tons of Bruce Coville books throughout my life, and there are some that I absolutely love and others that I think are just really fun but not my favorites. And I would say that this just falls into the fun category. Don't really have anything else to say about those 2, but I'm just wrapping them up here because like they were a series that I read in 2020. Next up, let's do the Heather Wells series by Meg Cabot. I have some mixed feelings about this one. I have to say, I quite enjoyed reading this series. It hit a sweet spot for me as it is fluffy, easygoing contemporary, but it's also a mystery series, and those are two things that I love. So this is a series following this woman who is like a former like teen pop star kind of, and now she works in resident life at a dorm at a college. She's retired from her pop career. People keep getting murdered, and so like in every book she basically solves a murder. Meg Cabot is just the queen of like fun contemporary fiction. I went really back and forth with this series. I gobbled the books down. I really enjoyed reading them. I love an easily digestible contemporary, and I love mysteries, so I'm really happy that this series exists. But I think that it's like kind of objectively bad in a lot of ways. So we have the first one, is called Size 12 is Not Fat. I gave this book 3 stars. Then we have Size 14 is Not Fat Either. I gave that 2.5 stars. Big Boned is the third one. I gave that one 3 stars as well. Size 12 and Ready to Rock was like a very weak 3 stars. And then The Bride Wore Size 12 is the 5th and final book in the series. I gave that one 2.5 stars. So as you can see, this was really, all the books were kind of riding the line between like 2.5 to 3 stars. So they weren't awful, but they weren't incredible either. I just think that the writing in these is not super great. The plots were often pretty simplistic. This series also falls very heavily on like a lot of stereotypes and tropes that I don't really think are really necessary. I would say that you have to kind of go into these books knowing what to expect, and if you're in the right mood for it, by all means, give them a go. I don't regret reading them at all. I really had fun with them. Would I recommend them as just like good books? No, I don't think they're very good. Oh my goodness, I think we're almost done. I have 2 more series to talk about, and they're both duologies, so they should be pretty quick. We have the Mateo Alacron series by Nancy Farmer. The first book is called The House of the Scorpion, and the second one is The Lord of Opium. These are kind of older titles. I think that they were pretty popular back in their day. I know a lot of people have read them, but I never did. And I really, really loved this first book. The second book, I struggled with a little bit. I didn't like it as much. I kind of forced myself to read the second one when I wasn't really in a reading mood, and I think that hindered my enjoyment of it. So the second one, I think I gave like 3 to 3.5 stars, but the first one was a really strong 4 stars for me. This is a dystopian series, and it kind of follows a world where cloning is very commonplace. People will manufacture clones and get rid of their like cognitive function abilities, so they're basically like just bodies. Clones are like essentially used as like slavery in this world, and it just dives into the ethics of that. I think it was really, really interesting. This book honestly reminded me that I love dystopian. I don't read a ton of it anymore because I think the dystopian craze has died down a bit. And I do think that the genre is kind of oversaturated with like really weak titles. And so a lot of the times I'll pick up a dystopian and it's just bad. But this to me was very quality dystopian fiction. It was a very well needed reminder that when it's done well, dystopian can be incredible. I loved the ethical questions that were raised in this series in regards to the development of medicine and cloning technology and just like the future of our society in terms of medical advancements and scientific advancements. I thought it was just really, really interesting, and I just loved it. The protagonist of this series is in a unique position, and I think that it's just really fascinating to see what he goes through and the type of person that he becomes. I think that this just poses a lot of questions, and I think it was really well done, and I'm really glad that I read it, and it's something that I would like to reread and I think give the second book a more fair shot. I feel like I should have just enjoyed the second book more than I did. But still, really fantastic world. I really liked the series. I definitely would recommend it. And then the final series that I have to talk about is a really popular one that I read for the first time, and I was very happily surprised by this. It is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. So the first one is called Stargirl, and the second one is called Love, Stargirl. I don't really know how to describe it. It's about this girl, and she causes waves in her small town high school. To me, this isn't meant to be read like exactly literally. I think that this story is very much like an allegory. It kind of has almost like a fable vibe to it, because I feel like this book just represents a lot of greater themes. I really enjoyed that about it. This book is just very much about like social norms and conformity and individuality, and it just asks a lot of questions of young readers, and it poses a really interesting story. It presents these really interesting characters, and I just really loved it. They turned this into a movie recently, and I watched the trailer and I was like, I don't think that looks super good. Like, this just looks like a very extreme like manic pixie dream girl trope, and I think that you could interpret this book that way, but to me that's really like not what it was at all. I think that it's so much more than that. The second book I also loved, but for very different reasons. But I just thought it was a really lovely, moving story about humanity. I think I gave both of these books 4 out of 5 stars. When I finished the first one, I got to the end and I just like started crying, like very suddenly. Everything like hit me all at once. To me, they did a lot. Yeah, I was really happy to have read it finally. And that I think is it. That's like, I think that was 17 series that I read. It was like almost like 50 books in total, like something ridiculous like that. But we're done. That's it. Those were all of the full series that I read in 2020 and what I thought about them. Thank you so much for watching. I will be coming out very soon with my statistics video for 2020, and now that I've like finally wrapped up all the books that I read in 2020, I can talk about my reading as a whole, and then I'll be done with all of my 2020 stuff, and we can talk about books that I've been reading in 2021, because obviously we are well into 2021 now, and I have been reading, so I will be sharing those books with you soon, I hope. But thank you for bearing with me. Yeah, that's about it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.